I agree with you that this is also what drew me to crypto. This is why I had some crypto guests on as well. Never to talk about how rich you can get with crypto, because I think most of that is a scam. But I really find it interesting, some of the experiments that they are doing with trying to create private currencies. But also, like you mentioned, you just don't see that much of it being used for real economic activity. You see a lot of these stablecoins being used to gamble more in financial markets, but not that many to actually buy stuff. And that's a shame.
The problem is that if the entire advantage that they have, which is sort of theoretically lower transaction costs, that comes from being sort of outside the law, like from not being regulated.
Yeah.
And who is going to run a business that's outside the law? That the answer, unfortunately, seems to be outlaws, And a good example, like to compare it to a regular business, you could say, why is it cheaper to stay at an Airbnb than it is to stay at a hotel? And the answer is that hotels have all sorts of regulations that they have to comply to, and Airbnbs don't. And so once again, you end up maybe with a non-level playing field between the two. And it's sort of, it is what it is. But the other thing actually that fascinates me a little bit about crypto, and it just ties into concepts around financial regulation, is that I'm often amazed, people will lose some money, we'll say, in some crypto scam, and they'll kind of rail online and say, like, why is the SEC doing nothing to protect my stolen monkey JPEGs, And the funny thing, I think there's an interesting thing that we all fall foul of, maybe, is the idea that, and it's back even to the idea of sort of too big to fail ideas and so on, is that most of us, when we live within a regulated financial system, we kind of believe that there are protections there in place for us that are actually only in place for us in the regulated financial system. And so, for example, if and there is, of course, then this cost to regulation, but a lot of people often, I think that people don't understand the risk difference between, when they move outside of that system. And it's even, a good example is even of like pre the whole crypto thing, you would see this in the area of like private investments in companies where people didn't necessarily understand that there's a big difference between the audited statements that you'll see from an exchange listed company and the kind of financial statements you might get from the friend of yours who has a startup company that you've put money into. And I think that it's an interesting thing, because to a certain extent you could argue the regulators are somewhat to blame in that, or at least regulated financial systems make people think that they are safe and that financial markets are safe.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go out into the wilds of crypto or private investments and find themselves being eaten alive. And they're like, well, where did all of these sharks come from? And it's like, well, you're in the deep sea now. You're no longer in the little pond you used to be in. And so that's also a fascinating thing to me about crypto, is just almost a confusion that people have. Like they sort of say, well, isn't it illegal for Elon Musk to pump Dogecoin? And it's like, well, not really. Like, it's just, it's not a security. It's not even a defined thing. The day might come when, some regulation exists around that. But at the moment, it's even interesting right now that the SEC are prosecuting people for insider trading in the crypto space, because it's not obvious that a lot of that stuff fits within the existing regulatory framework. Like, in many ways, you could argue that a lot of crypto is sort of like buying stuff on eBay rather than investing in a stock or a bond.
And I'm not sure if I can ask you this question because you're a finance professional, but